There is a moment buried in the oldest layers of Greek mythology, never carved into the friezes tourists photograph, when the father of Olympus screamed. Not in triumph, in agony. Typhon had stripped the sinews from Zeus's body like cords torn from the walls of heaven. The god of gods lay in a cave in Cilicia, as helpless as a storm with its thunder removed. Every other god on Olympus fled. They did not regroup. They did not form a line. They ran to Egypt and hid in animal skins. This is where we begin. Not with monsters the gods crushed easily, but with monsters the gods could barely fight, monsters they had to trick, monsters they could only delay, and finally, monsters they learned to live alongside, because destroying them was never truly an option. And the worst of them were not always defeated, only delayed, contained, or left waiting beneath the world. These are not stories about monsters. These are stories about what the gods actually feared. Number 10. Civilisation, the hunger beneath. Before the Aztec world had land, it had teeth. Civilisation was a vast primordial creature, part crocodile, part fish, part toad, with mouths at every joint of its body, opening and closing, since before the first god drew breath. Tezcatlipoca and Quetzalcoatl could not begin creation without going through it first. They used Tezcatlipoca's own foot as bait. Civilisation did it clean away. Then the gods pinned the creature down and tore the world from its body. The first price of creation was a god's foot. The earth beneath you is the carcass of something that was never tamed, only killed. Civilisation was hunger with no strategy and no ceiling. The next monster had something far more dangerous: speed. Number 9. The golden-winged Great Pung, the predator heaven couldn't catch. In Journey to the West, Da Peng Jin Chur Ming Wang, the golden-winged Great Pung, was the kind of creature that showed exactly where heaven's power stopped. The story gives it a speed so absurd that one wing beat crosses 90,000 li. It fed on dragons and sea serpents, moving so fast and so far that ordinary heavenly force could not easily contain it. The celestial bureaucracy had regulations for demons, river gods, and rogue immortals. It had no answer for a predator that made heaven feel small. In practical terms, heaven had put a velvet rope in front of something that had already eaten the guard. When Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, the same figure who had already humiliated the entirety of heaven, encountered the Pung, even he found the contest genuine. For those who discovered Chinese myth through Black myth, Wukong, this is the deeper terror behind that world. Heaven can be humiliated, but some beings are harder to contain than heaven wants to admit. The Jade Emperor's armies could not resolve the crisis. Buddha intervened, not because the Pung was beyond him, but because ordinary heavenly force had reached its limit. The Pung was not crushed like an ordinary demon. It was contained through a higher order of divine authority. Heaven did not defeat the Great Pung. Heaven managed it. That is the kind of distinction heaven does not like to admit. Number 8. Mahishasura, the legalistic failure. Mahishasura understood that the most dangerous weapon in existence is a clause. He was a shape-shifting buffalo demon who performed years of fierce austerity until Brahma, bound by divine law, had no choice but to appear and grant him a boon. The terms were precise. No man and no male god could ever kill him. The cosmos agreed. The boon was sealed. He then walked into heaven and took it. The male gods could not touch him, not from lack of power, but because the universe had placed him outside the reach of their weapons. So the gods pooled everything they had and willed a new being into existence, Durga, radiant, multi-armed, and completely unbounded by Mahishasura's legal fine print. She killed him. But the victory does not erase the fact the gods needed to create a new category of divine being to close a gap a demon had found in their own design. Mahishasura did not overpower the gods first, he outread them. So far, the gods have lost flesh, authority, and legal control. But the next monster did not attack heaven, it attacked the supply chain of life itself. Number 7. Vritra, the resource hostage. Vritra did not declare war. He swallowed the world's water. In the Vedic tradition, Vritra was a colossal serpent who coiled around the mountains and held every river, every lake, every rain cloud inside his body. The world dried, fires failed, the chain of sacrifice through which mortals sustained the gods and gods sustained the cosmos, began to break. Vritra had not attacked creation directly. He had made it uninhabitable. Indra needed a weapon that did not yet exist, a thunderbolt forged from the bones of the sage Dadichi, whose skeleton alone had the hardness to pierce Vritra's scales. Dadichi agreed. He gave his life willingly so his bones could become what was needed. Indra used them to shatter Vritra and release the waters. The gods did not find the weapon. A sage had to become it. Vritra held creation hostage through control. The next monster did not seize the world. She tried to replace it. Number 6. Tiamat, the mother of abominations. Before Babylon raised its first wall, it told this story. In the beginning, there was no world, only water, and the water had a name. Tiamat was the primordial salt sea. The gods of Babylon were born from her. When those children killed her consort Apsu, she did not mourn quietly. She built, shaping monsters from her own flesh, appointing a general, raising a rival divine order with its own hierarchy and its own claim on existence. Not a rebellion, a counter-creation. Marduk killed her and built the world from her divided body, sky from one half, earth from the other. Many of the world's oldest mythologies share this structure, order defeating chaos to establish the world. But the victory is never total. The chaos is incorporated, not destroyed. You are living inside the body of what was supposed to be the enemy. The next monster is worse, because defeating it was never permanent. Number 5. Apep, the eternal anti-creation. Apep was not born. It had always existed, a serpent of vast and unmeasured length coiled in the darkness before creation, the void the sun's first rising had pushed back but never destroyed. Every night, as Ra's solar bark made its passage through the Duat, the underworld hours between sunset and dawn, Apep was waiting. Texts, like the Book of Overthrowing Apep, preserved the spells and rituals used to help defeat the serpent again and again, burning its image, binding it in ceremony, cursing it by name so the bark could pass. The gods aboard were not natural allies. They were allies by necessity, united only by the shared catastrophe of a morning that might not come. Apep was not an enemy Egypt defeated. He was the enemy Egypt had to defeat every night so morning could exist. Number 4. Typhon, the humiliator of Olympus. We return to Cilicia, to the cave, to Zeus on the stone floor with no power left in his limbs. Typhon was immense. Ancient sources describe him touching the stars with his head, his arms reaching to both horizons, his lower body a writhing mass of serpents that shook the ground like a fault line. He fought Zeus directly and won. He stripped the divine sinews, the cords of thunder and sovereign power, from Zeus's body and hid them, leaving the king of the gods silent and pinned. Every Olympian ran: Ares, Athena, Apollo, Artemis. They fled south and took animal forms to avoid being noticed. Hermes and Pan retrieved the sinews through subterfuge. Zeus was restored, returned, and buried Typhon beneath Mount Etna, whose eruptions the Greeks understood as the monster still raging underground. The gods won. But here is the line that does not get erased. They had still run. Modern audiences love the fantasy of watching a throne bleed. Typhon is one of the oldest versions of that thrill. Number 3. Jormungandr, the poison of the world. Odin did not deliberate long over Jormungandr. When the children of Loki were presented to the Allfather, the decisions came quickly. Hel was exiled to govern the dead. Fenrir was bound, and Jormungandr was thrown into the ocean encircling Midgard, not imprisoned with ceremony, simply thrown with the urgency of a god solving a problem before it fully became one. It grew until its body encircled the entire world, and its teeth found its own tail. At Ragnarok, when it releases that hold, the sea itself becomes the first weapon of the final war. Thor meets it on the field. Thor had hauled it from the deep once before and looked into its eyes at the end of a fishing line, and he came back. He came back at Ragnarok too. He killed it, then walked 9 steps before the accumulated venom in his lungs ended him. 9 steps. Then silence. Jormungandr kills through venom. Fenrir kills through certainty. Number 2. Fenrir, the ticking clock of fate. The gods knew what Fenrir would do. the prophecy was not cryptic. At Ragnarok, Fenrir would break free and swallow Odin whole. This was known. This was fixed. And yet the gods raised him in Asgard. They fed him as he grew. Only Tyr brave enough to bring the meat. When his size became impossible to ignore, they bound him with Gleipnir, a ribbon woven from 6 things that do not exist: the sound of a cat's footstep, the beard of a woman, the roots of a mountain, the sinews of a bear, the breath of a fish, the spittle of a bird. Fenrir accepted the binding only if a god placed a hand in his mouth as guarantee of good faith. Tyr placed his. The ribbon held. Fenrir bit down. Tyr lost the hand. The gods did not bind Fenrir because they had beaten him. They bound him because prophecy had already beaten them. What that waiting cost Odin is the part the myths leave mostly unspoken. The Allfather, who sacrificed an eye at Mimir's well for wisdom, who hung 9 days on Yggdrasil for the runes, spent the long centuries before Ragnarok filling Valhalla with the heroic dead, not as honor, as arithmetic. He built the army anyway, because action was the only dignity left to a god who already knew the ending. Fenrir did not break Odin at Ragnarok. Fenrir broke Odin the moment the prophecy was spoken. Fenrir is not the end of the world. Fenrir is the deadline. Number 1, Leviathan, the abyss given form. And then there is Leviathan, and here the list changes register entirely. Every other monster in this countdown exists within a system that imagined at least the possibility of resolution. The gods might win, the gods might lose, but there was always a contest. Leviathan is not framed as a contest. In the book of Job, God does not present Leviathan as a defeated enemy or a trophy of divine power. He presents it as evidence. Job has demanded answers about suffering, and God's response is a catalog of creation's most extreme and ungovernable forces. Leviathan is the final exhibit. Can you draw out Leviathan with a hook? Can you press down its tongue with a cord? These are not boasts. They are a recalibration, a reminder that some forces underwriting existence are not arranged for human convenience, and that certain things operate permanently beyond human command. In Job, human weapons are described as useless against it. Its movement through water reorganizes the sea behind it into a new and hostile geography. The surface altered as though something fundamental has shifted beneath. Later Jewish tradition says God created 2 leviathans and destroyed the female immediately, understanding that 2 such creatures permitted to persist would threaten the continuation of everything else. The male remains, one of creation's most dangerous surviving boundaries, preserved at the place where order ends and something older begins. Leviathan is not a monster that challenges the order of creation. It is the edge of the ordered world, where power stops being useful and awe is the only honest response. It waits below the ordered world, not defeated, only contained. These 10 monsters were not invented merely to frighten children. They were warnings from civilizations honest enough to admit that order is not the default, but an achievement maintained at cost. The gods in these stories are not omnipotent. They are incumbent, holding the line, paying the price, running when they must, and returning when they can. Which monster would you trust least to stay contained? Tell us in the comments, subscribe to the Mythic Sun, and remember, the older the story, the less safe the gods become.